It's time to talk about the important issues for the natural state. And there's only one place to turn for that. Opportunity Arkansas's Nick Horton. You can find Nick's work at opportunityarkansas.org.
And welcome back to the Wednesday edition of First News. It is the 21st of January, 19 minutes in front of 8 o'clock. It does mean that it's time for us to visit with the founder and CEO of Opportunity Arkansas. It is Nick Horton. And Nick, welcome back to the show. Now, Nick, before we get into the business of the day, are you someone who likes the snow and the cold if it does actually show up here this weekend?
Yeah, I like the snow. I like, I like it for about 24 hours. I think similar to most folks out there. Right. You got little kids at home. You get snowed in. After about 24 hours, you're getting a little buggy. So,
sure.
So you're getting a little cabin fever, a little stir crazy, ready to get out of the house. But yeah, we love it, and our kids are at a really fun age where we still get out and make snowmen and
do a little
throw
sledding.
snowballs at each other and do a little sledding. It's a little flat around here, but we do our best. And
go find a nice
we're all
park
excited.
or something. Do you own sleds? Yeah. Do you own sleds, or are you guys going on the cardboard box?
We do.
Okay,
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, no, growing up, we used whatever we could find, an old piece of barn tin or a piece of cardboard.
Yeah, because that won't slice
the
edge of that won't slice your finger off. But
in hindsight, wasn't probably the best choice, but we were all up to date on our tetanus shots, so it was fine.
That's good. That's good. So, well, we'll see how it plays out. But Nick, getting into some of the business today, there's been a lot of talk about healthcare in our country lately. Of course, that was a part of the government shutdown last year, and I think this conversation's great because maybe it could change the direction of this incredibly broken system in our country. But you pointed out in a recent article from the Conway Regional Health System CEO, he was talking about hospitals being shut down, which flies in the face of what we're told with Obamacare, what it would do for hospitals. From what you've seen, why are hospitals having such a hard time, at least in Arkansas? And before you get into that, I also saw that just this week, the CEO of the Arkansas Colleges of Health Education, Kyle Parker, he spoke to the Little Rock Rotary Club, and he said Arkansas is the absolute worst state in the country for rural hospitals, and that includes them shutting down as well as being understaffed and everything else. Why has Obamacare put us in? Is that what's put us in this particular situation now?
Well, it's certainly a big part of it, and I think what's so frustrating for folks that have been paying attention, and myself, unfortunately, having lived through this for the better part of a decade now. I mean, I was there at the state capitol when we had this huge, long, drawn-out debate in 2013. It was the first Republican legislature in history, and we had a Democrat governor, Mike Beebe, at the time, so it was still divided government. And you had so many of these legislators on the Republican side who'd been elected on a platform of opposing Obamacare and saying, we're never going to let this happen, we're never going to accept the Medicaid expansion, which is, by the way, the biggest part of Obamacare. And then Governor Beebe, frankly, hoodwinked all of them, and he came up with this plan that he called the private option. It was a private version, a private way of doing this. And instead of giving people just regular Medicaid cards, able-bodied working-age adults, dramatically increasing our Medicaid rolls, we would, quote, put them in private insurance plans. Well, those private insurance plans, the cost of which has now, we know on the back end, more than doubled over time, and it was all still going to be paid for by taxpayers. And by the way, it was still going to be paid for through Medicaid. So it was still Medicaid expansion, but Governor Beebe convinced a lot of these Republicans to go along with it. And here we are 10 years later, and this was a program that was sold on the promise of saving our hospitals. I mean, the Hospital Association, the Healthcare Association, every major hospital in the state of Arkansas, they were having town hall meetings. They were sending out mailers. They had a hashtag on Twitter saying, keep our hospitals open. If we don't pass this, all of our hospitals are going to close. And now what they'll tell you, Toby, is, well, it would have been so much worse. Had we not done this, it would have been even worse.
Of course.
But the reality is the promises were made that Arkansas we were going to save all of our hospitals, and we were going to create hospital jobs, and there was going to be all this new revenue and all this economic development. And I think what's really tiresome about this whole thing is this is really every 6 months now. Every 6 months, if you pay attention to the headlines, things are wonderful. Hospitals have record year, record profits, and then 6 months later, things are horrible. We're going to have to shut down. We're all filing bankruptcy. And there's just this constant ping pong back and forth, kind of makes your head spin. But it seems unavoidable at this point that at minimum, it has not. The Obamacare expansion has not kept its promises of keeping Arkansas. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Toby, 4 or 5 years ago. They were traveling around the country to other states and in the media and elsewhere saying Arkansas is the best place to create a hospital job and the best place financially for hospitals in the entire country. We're so glad we expanded Medicaid. Look how great it is and how great it's been for our hospitals. And here we are. We're back in this cycle, back in the 6-month ping pong of, well, actually everything's horrible and we're going to have to shut down again. And of course now they're blaming it all on President Trump. So it's just really tiresome. And to your point, I think we can still hope that at some point they're going to just realize they got to change their business model, and there's got to be some really big changes here made across the board.
Well, like a lot of things with the government, I mean, if we ran our households this way, we would be failing and would be out of a house and a home right quick. And so it's unfortunate the government doesn't operate on a little more in that direction. I want to switch gears, Nick. Right at the end of last year, some new Board of Correction nominees were named by our governor. A couple of them seem to be getting a little bit of flack from the left at this point, but which tells me that maybe they got the right people in there. Who knows? But who can you talk a little bit about who's been elected to the Board of Corrections now, and if you like these picks, if you like these nominees, and then I want to also on the back end of this get into a little bit about what the Board of Corrections does, because all we ever really hear about the Board of Corrections is, well, the Board of Corrections made this decision, they voted on this, they voted on that, but we never actually see what they're doing, what they're actually involved in, and so maybe we can get into that as well. But what did you think about this group of nominees?
Well, yeah, a lot to unpack. I mean, I think, look, one of the so the governor appointed, as you mentioned, on New Year's Eve, I believe it was, 3 new appointees. And for folks' awareness out there, there's 7 members of the Board of Corrections. So she appointed 3 new ones, and then she had previously appointed a new one early last year. And so the math on this is really important, too, and I just want to make sure we don't overlook that, that now out of 7 appointees, Governor Sanders has now appointed, just in the last 18 months or so, 4 of the members of the Board of Corrections. So conceivably, we would think that now she's in charge, like her administration and like her people are in place now and control a majority of the Board of Corrections. Now, what does the Board of Corrections do? That's a really great question, Toby, and I think if you asked 10 people, if you asked 10 state legislators even, you would get 10 or maybe even 12 different answers about that, because there's a lot of disagreement about what their role actually is, what their role should be. When you look at Amendment 33 of the state constitution, which is what the Board of Corrections always cites and sort of hides behind and says, well, we're this super mega constitutional board, it's extremely vague. It's extremely vague in terms of what their authority and their powers actually are. I think what we've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years is that there's been a lack of leadership in the legislature. There's been, to some degree, a lack of leadership in the executive branch when it comes to corrections policy. Governor Sanders has, to her credit, sort of changed that in the last few years. But because of that, the Board of Corrections has they've gotten a little too big for their britches, you might say. And so if you ask a member of the Board of Corrections, at least the previous board members in particular who've just rolled off, like the former chairman, now Benny Magnus, they'll tell you they're in charge of everything. I mean, they'll tell you they're in charge of changing the light bulbs and paying the janitor. And, I mean, they're running the day-to-day operations. They're doing everything. And I think, I'm very confident, Toby, that the reason we have seen so much dysfunction and corruption and decay in our corrections system in Arkansas is because no one knows the answer to that question that you just asked. No one really knows who's in charge of what,
right,
and what the role of the Board of Corrections really should be. And when there's no clear lines of responsibility, there can be no accountability. Right. When there's no responsibility and you don't know what someone is supposed to be in charge of and what they are and aren't supposed to be doing, you can't hold them accountable. And then, of course, you're talking about a board that's wholly unaccountable on its face because it doesn't report to the voters. They get 7-year terms. They can't, it's very difficult. Like the governor basically is the only one that can remove them, and seems like a very tenuous process to actually do that. So the whole system really still, in my view, needs to be overhauled. I think the question we should be asking right now is, why do we even have a Board of Corrections? Why do we need this big, mega, super constitutional board that no one knows what they do, but they think that, at least up until this point, I have to caveat all this because we've got a totally new board now, but up until this point, they've thought they can just do whatever the heck they want. I mean, Toby, you remember not 2 years ago, they went out and hired an attorney and sued the state of Arkansas.
Right, just on their own.
Because they didn't like what, on their own, without any legal authority to do so. And that's been tied up in court for 2 years. We've been wasting tens of thousands of dollars in taxpayer resources. And kudos to Attorney General Tim Griffin and others that have been doing their best to fight that and make sure that that the taxpayers are represented in all of this and not stuck with the bill. Mm-hmm. But it's just a total mess over there. And ask anyone, like, what value does the Board of Corrections really create for the people and the taxpayers of Arkansas? I think it'd be really hard-pressed to come up with something. And the legislature, again, and the governor have put a lot of hard work. The PROTECT Act, which we did some work on and very proud of, to fix our broken parole system. Mm-hmm. They're suing. They sued to stop huge portions of the PROTECT Act. Why? Well, because they didn't like it. They thought it impeded on their authority. So I think the question is, when are we going to start actually reducing the size of government, and why do we need a Board of Corrections? I mean, I think that's a conversation that we
are
really
there other states out there, Nick, that don't have a Board of Corrections or this type of a body, that's somewhat overseeing the corrections department?
Yes, there are a lot of states that don't have them. There are a lot of southern states that used to have them that have gotten rid of them over time. Yeah, and I think that's kind of to the point here that it's kind of an archaic concept that we need to move away from, because we've got a legislature, we've got division leaders, we've got a secretary of corrections, like we've got other people in authority that are engaged in the day-to-day. We've got legislators and the governor who are certainly accountable to the voters. Like, there are much better ways, in my view. And again, when you get back to this idea, I think about even in my own household, folks out there, if they've got kids, my son's, let's say, responsible for feeding the cats, and I think that he's responsible for taking out the trash. Well, the trash doesn't get taken out, and I want to discipline my son. Well, guess what? It wasn't actually his responsibility, and he had no idea that it was his responsibility. And like, he's doing the chores that he thinks he's supposed to be doing. Well, you can't have accountability. The point being, you can't have accountability, clearly, if people don't know what they're responsible for, what they're supposed to be doing, and vice versa. And I think that's this big tangled web that we have now with the Board of Corrections. That's a really big problem.
The biggest thing I took from that is that you should get a dog for your kid to feed.
No, don't worry. We have dogs, too. Yeah, we got it all. Dogs, chickens, we got it all.
Oh, you got everything. You got the full petting zoo going on. So it's a very interesting conversation, Nick, and I think we're going to have to continue it. Real quick on the way out here, you're going to be hosting the Steve Finnegan Show this afternoon. A little preview of what's going to be going on?
Well, let me just say, because I neglected to say this, but one of the appointments for the Board of Corrections, was an absolute excellent pick. Mm-hmm. Boyce Hamlet, who the governor appointed to chair what used to be the Parole Board, but now they've renamed as the Post-Prison Transfer Board. He will now have a dual seat as well on the Board of Corrections, and he is someone that it just could not be more qualified and well-suited for that position, has a background in law enforcement, has served on the parole board before, understands the importance of victims and putting victims first in the justice system. So super excited about that, and I wanted to be sure I recognized him. Yeah. And a little bit of breaking news. I'm going to be in studio this afternoon, filling in for Steve, and really excited about that. We may talk about some of this correction stuff. We're going to talk about education freedom and some of the developments with the program there. And we're also going to talk about, I'm going to have a legislator from Northwest Arkansas on, Toby, and we're going to talk about this whole situation with the dean of the U of A Law School and what really transpired there. So should be really good. Hope people tune in.
No, looking forward to it. Appreciate you doing that. So Nick will be on between 4 and 6 this afternoon here at the here on KARN, and filling in for Steve on the Finnegan Show. So looking forward to that. Nick, always appreciate the time that you spend with us here on the radio, and I know you're going to get double duty today, but we do appreciate it. So thanks for coming on the show this morning. We'll hear from you at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
All right. Thanks, brother.